Now let's get back to the politics. Only 48 hours left. We've got Michael Kroger, Stephen Conroy, gentlemen. It's the business end. Stephen, a few nerves, I think, for Labor, given where you were in 2019. But what did you think of Anthony Albanese this afternoon on this program?
No, look, I think Albo's looking relaxed. Tired. You look at Josh, who was on just before Albo. You look at Albo, they're both exhausted. Having been through this sausage making machine called an election, myself, you get to the last couple of days and you've just got to force yourself to keep going. And Josh is, spending hours and hours and hours on the polling booth in Kooyong where he's under pressure. Albo's on a 5-state blitz right now. They'll be ready to collapse by the time polls close at 6 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to disagree with that, I think. But we won't be. That's when we fire up, Michael Kroger. That's when we'll be looking at the numbers coming in. And Michael, what's your sense of it? I know that you've said to me for many months and to our viewers, it's difficult when you're going for a fourth term. That's the fundamental point here that you've pointed out several times. Where is it now? 48 hours to go.
Well, as Scott Morrison said at his launch on Sunday, it's only his second term, so it's not really a fourth term if you listen to Scott. Look, here's the truth of the matter. If the election's held today and the polls are correct, then obviously Albo wins and he gets 5, he might get 6 or 7, he may get more or less, but clearly he'll get a majority if the polls are right. But Kieran, we were in this position 3 years ago. We saw what happened with Trump, with Brexit, with Boris Johnson, where there are serious cultural issues which divide the nation, as they are in this election. There is a shy Conservative voter effect. Now, the pollsters all got it wrong in all those elections I mentioned. And the question is, how much have they underestimated the shy Conservative vote effect in this election? We haven't had any pollsters explain how they factor that into their updated polling methods, which they now assure us are correct. But there hasn't been a cultural election in Australia since the last federal election where those polls were dramatically wrong. So to use that phrase we used 3 years ago, when we only described Scott Morrison's chances then as a narrow path to victory, there is still a narrow path to victory for him, and it is that his vote is underestimated in Chisholm and Bass and Braddon and Boothby and Pearce and Swan and Reid, the seats that Labor need to win. So that is the main reason why it's still in there with a chance. And secondly, the unemployment number today must give people confidence to think, well, there's Morrison and Frydenberg. They seem to know what they're doing, and they've seen the Albo stumbles. And you've got to hope that in the last 48 hours, people think, let's not risk it.
Stephen Conroy, it's hard to disagree with Michael on the narrow path to victory. I think that's fair to say. Given our lived experience of 2019 and given where the polls were, you'd be crazy not to say there's still not a path to victory for the coalition.
Absolutely. As you would expect, everyone asks me, what do I think? How's it going? And I say, look, I'm optimistic, but I'm not confident. I think the rest of today, all day, tomorrow, there are votes still in play. For Labor, while the Prime Minister is wildly unpopular in some areas, they're not necessarily the areas that Labor needs to win seats. The Prime Minister is, relatively popular in Queensland. We need to win seats in Queensland. He's relatively popular in some of the western suburb seats in New South Wales. We need to win some of those seats. And then if you factor in that, the Liberals have been targeting Corangamite, they've been targeting Lingiari, they've been targeting Parramatta. These are seats where Scott Morrison is not as on the nose as he is in the Teal seats, the inner city seats, the traditional Liberal heartland seats. So Labor can't afford to relax for a second before 6 o'clock on Saturday night.
Michael Kroger, on those Teal seats that Stephen alluded to there, what's your best guess? Do they get 1, 2, 3, none?
Well, I don't think they get none. The closest one obviously looks like Wentworth to me because Dave Sharma's only got a 1% margin, but people out there tell me that he's immensely increased his visibility and popularity since the last election. I think Goldstein is difficult, and Higgins and Kooyong we should hold, but they're close. So we're in a new political paradigm in the Western world where blue-collar, the working middle class are voting for conservative parties like Liberal National Party here, Conservatives in Britain, the Republicans in America, and the rich, wealthy, the Wall Street set, the Prince Harry set, who don't worry about mortgages, who never campaign on cost of living. I mean, the Teals here and Higgins and in Kooyong and Goldstein, they're really campaigning on cost of living because they don't worry about it. So those that are not price sensitive and have done incredibly well in Australia the last 40 years have time to indulge the matters the policies that interest them, which aren't the top priority for the blue-collar working class seats. So, yep, they're likely to score, and I'd be surprised if they got zero. But I'll tell you one thing about Saturday night, Kieran, and you'll quote this back to me when Stephen and I are on at some belated hour. There will be some shocks on Saturday night which no one has predicted. And you'll say to me, well, no one predicted that. And I'll say, you're quite right, we didn't. That's what will happen because that's what happened in 19. That's what happened in 19.
Yeah. And is that something that, Stephen Conroy, happens invariably at the vast majority of elections, that you do see these results pop up out of left field?
Yeah, look, particularly in some of the regional seats. I mean, two seats, to take Michael's point, there are two seats that have gone completely under the radar because the Teals have absolutely dominated the sort of non-Labor Liberal media, and that's the seat of Nichols, which used to be called Murray. It's based around Shepparton. Damien Drum, former football coach, very well known. He's retired. And there is a very serious challenger, independent challenger, that is running in Nichols, and the Liberals and the Nationals are very, very concerned about it. And another seat, same sort of situations happening, is Grey in South Australia. So, I mean, there's two that you just want to keep your eye on. If it's getting tight, if Labor don't quite get as many, or the Libs win a couple and the Teals don't do quite as well, there's a couple of seats that could still turn the result of the election. Because if Labor's sitting on 73 and the Libs think they're going to be on 74 and suddenly they lose one of those two, they're back at 72 behind Labor. That's the sort of surprise that you could really see turn up. And everyone go, oh my God, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, where did that come from? And Michael, just finally to you, the one thing I'm a little sceptical about, I could be proven wrong on Saturday night, but just a little sceptical about is the flow on from the states. Just because McGowan's popular doesn't necessarily mean it translates into a swag of seats. Maybe Labor picks up 2 or 3. I'm just a bit sceptical about it, given past experience.
Well, look, Western Australians vote, as Queenslanders do, they vote Labor in the state because they feel Labor are better at service delivery. That's the bottom line. And they vote Coalition federally because they think on foreign affairs, border and mining, the Coalition is far more supportive of them. And that's why they've delivered for the Coalition in spades in Queensland and West Australia and kept us in government for a long time now. The other dynamic now in Victoria is, even though the Labor government won well here in 18, there is a very powerful anti-Daniel Andrews feeling now in Victoria for a whole host of reasons which most people know about. And we've got, really outstanding candidates in Dunkley and Corangamite and McEwen who have fought hard. And the Daniel Andrews, anti-Andrews feeling is very strong in those areas. So you may throw up a result there which no one really predicted. I mean, we're in with a chance in them, but if we win them, it'll be because of the strength of the anti-Andrews feeling. That hasn't come through in a lot of the press coverage, but reports from the candidates and our MPs who be down there tell me that feeling is very strong. So that's another factor which weighs in, Kieran.
Yeah, well, we'll be exploring all of that with you and Stephen, Michael Kroger, Stephen Conroy. Thanks as always.